New World adding Human Ward is truly, utterly ridiculous. I'm going to tell you why I believe that and what I think will be done about it in the future. Before I do that though, if you want to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is truly the best way. Otherwise, you can come and give me a follow over on Twitch. I'm streaming a lot more, having a lot of fun. I might be streaming when this goes live. So let's get into the main point. Human Ward is a little bit silly in itself, and Ward gear overall is getting a little bit ridiculous. So I've gone on record before in some other videos talking about how I don't think Ward gear is the best type of progression. I think Ward gear and Resilient could simply be removed, and I think the game would be in a better state. And what's interesting, since they added Human Ward for the new expedition, the Empyrean Forge, I'm seeing some people who enjoyed the original system now agree that it's getting to the point that it's a bit silly. So for those of you who may not know what the hell I'm talking about, basically enemies have a type in New World, and then on your armor you can get a ward that basically protects you against that type. There are currently 6 wards in the game, I think, with 5 of them actually going to be used in an expedition. So the 5 that are going to be used will be Corrupted, Lost, Ancient, Angry Earth, and now in the March patch, Human Ward. The one ward that I think exists that isn't used is Beast. There might be some other wards that exist out there that aren't used, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. And for the end game mutation, so specifically M10, it's pretty much a requirement that you have a full set of ward gear. So once the Empyrean Forge comes out, if you want to have a full set of being able to do every expedition, you're going to need a minimum of 5 sets. Now, before the introduction of gear set storage, which is coming in this patch, you would have needed 4 sets, and my argument was always that's a little bit crazy to manage. Not only was it crazy to manage, I also felt that it was a little bit difficult to farm because it wasn't very fun. In my mind, once you grinded out one expedition to an M10 and you got gear score 625, the only way that it became easier was the fact you had to run M10s to get more shards to do the other dungeons, and I'm not really sure that was a very fun loop. Some people did enjoy it, right? And some people probably still do enjoy it. But for me, that kind of progression was just putting me off rather than encouraging me to participate. And I do think there are some obvious flaws with the system. A lot of people just run the expeditions that are the easiest. For example, we're on a Lazarus versus Barnacles week. Most people are running Lazarus and not Barnacles, right? You already have the Ancient Ward. It just makes sense. So some of the content isn't being done because of the system that they've created. So for me, it was too many at 4. If anything, it was too many at 2 because I just didn't like the system. I don't think it's a good idea to have a perk that is just being taken away that effectively becomes mandatory. I don't really like that as an idea. Now, I understand why it was there because it added some kind of progression to the PvE systems that we don't have otherwise. If we look at what we have PvE content wise, we have expeditions that are very similar, right? They're just 5-man dungeons. It's not like we had raids or anything like that. So progression wise, it was the mutations and it was getting different sets of mutations. I get it, it worked, it's functional. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it doesn't work as a system and it doesn't keep some people entertained. It obviously does. I just don't think it's a very good system, okay? And now, as I said, it's a little bit funny now that we're getting the Human Ward and you're going to need human trophies and human bane and all that kind of stuff. More people are coming around to the idea that there's just simply too many ward sets. We're going to have 5 in active use for expeditions. And by the way, if the worm somehow manages to be Beast instead of Angry Earth, which I think it's going to be Angry Earth, then oh my god, we would have 6 sets in use. That would be crazy, right? But we have 5 sets in use. We are going to have the gear set storage, which will make it a little bit easier. But let's say, for example, maybe you want to have 2 different roles. Maybe you want to play as a DPS and a healer, where you're now up to 10 sets. You can only cap out at 10, we think. So if you wanted to have a PvP set, well, you just don't have enough room, right? You're going to actually have to switch your gear all the time. It's going to be a pain in the backside, like it already is. And this, by the way, is to ignore the fact that some expeditions actually have multiple ward in them, as well as the new dungeon. The new Empyrean Forge has 3 different types of ward gear that you might technically want. It's got the Human Ward, it's got Angry Earth, and technically it's got a few Lost in it. Now, I don't think people are going to bother with the Lost Ward. I don't think it's necessarily worth it. I think it's only a handful of mobs. But maybe, and on an M10, if you've got that gear set storage, maybe you will just flick straight to it. And the gear set storage only goes so far, right? It doesn't change your attributes. So if your gear is actually giving you a different set of attributes, are you going to have to then respec your attributes as well? It's just very frustrating, right? So we now have several dungeons with multiple ward sets being required. Yes, it's a bit easier to change with the gear sets, but it's still a dumb idea, right? And then adding Human Ward, one, it just sounds stupid. Human Ward, Human Bane, Human Trophies. What is that naming convention? It's just a little bit silly. Somebody said it could have been Varangian Ward or even Eternum Ward. Yeah, something like that would have been so much better, right? Human Ward sounds ridiculous, and then they have to specify that it only works in PvE because it doesn't work in PvP. All round, I find it just distasteful a little bit. It just puts a sour taste in my mouth, ignoring the fact that there's no 5 gear sets that you might want. And I do truly think we've jumped the shark a little bit. I think it's now gone into the ridiculous category. I thought 4 was a little bit bad, and for me personally a bit ridiculous. I think 5 is that point where most people will be like, I understand this system, the system works, but the system just isn't fun and doesn't really make sense conceptually. It's a bad system. Now the more interesting question really is what can be done about it. And a bit of me thinks that they're making it more and more ridiculous so that when they remove it, there will be less complaints. At least I hope that's what they're doing. Because if they would have removed it when there were 3 or 4 gear sets required, the people who grinded them up to 625 gear scores and they'd had proper sets, they would have complained, right? Makes sense. They would have put in all that hard work and we would have just taken it away from them. But maybe Amazon are there like, well, if we take it to the nth degree, we make it as ridiculous as possible, when we remove them, nobody will complain because the system was that bad. In a way, I hope they're doing that. I hope it's some kind of Machiavellian plan that actually makes sense. However, I'm obviously not sure that that's the case. I just hope it's the case, right? Maybe they just backed themselves into a corner early on with the ward sets, didn't necessarily realise the full implications possibly, and then they were like, oh, we enjoy this system. And then the system is just sort of getting progressively worse and worse the more that they add to the game. I think at some point the ward gear is getting ditched. It's just a matter of when, I think. I do not think we will hit the expansion mark and we will still be chasing ward gear. Just doesn't make sense to me. We also know, for example, that they are going to try and help the other dungeons not being done. So when Barnacles isn't being done because everybody's doing Lazarus, they need to try and do something to like spark a bit of interest there. And what I think they're going to do, because they pretty much confirmed it in a dev update, is at some point they will lower the number of expedition mutator levels. We'll go from 10 to our number. Obviously I don't know what that number is. The question suggested 4, but it could easily be 5, 6, 7, 3, you know, it could be anything, I really don't know. That will help a little bit because it'll be easier to grind to the max level. If you're good enough, you'll actually just be able to do it like 3, 4, 5 times and be at M10. Not M10, but you get the gist. The M10 equivalency. That will help, and I think going forward when we have all the expeditions and we're starting from scratch basically when we get an increase in level score, then I think that will make a lot more sense. But to me, it's pretty simple what they should do. In the short term, I think they should make it an Eternum ward. You should have one PvE stat that is ward, and it applies to everything in Eternum. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to apply to the trophies, right? You can still keep them in the way that they are. Personally, I don't like the trophies, but that's not what we're talking about here. You just do that for Ward and Bane, and I honestly think that you'll have a better feeling game. Yes, the people who've grinded it out and have farmed it will be disadvantaged, right? But sometimes I think you just have to take the hit. I think it's basically doing more harm than good at this point, is what I'm trying to say, right? And even if you enjoy the system, do you not admit that it's a little bit silly? I mean, even if Human Ward wasn't so ridiculous sounding, I still think having a situation where you need 5 different PvE sets, just a little bit stupid. Now, people often mistake this and say, Jay, you just want everything super easy. I don't want everything super easy. I just want everything to feel like it makes sense and it's actually enjoyable. I'm not really bothered if they make it somehow harder to get full M10 set of gear, like with full ward. I don't necessarily mind if they then make it harder because they're like, oh, well, you're having less sets now, so we're making it harder to do that. What I dislike is something that just feels bad and is awkward to do. And it is actually a little bit frustrating when you think about it. Let's say you need 5 sets. I think the amount of Umbral Shards you need, there's probably, I don't know the exact mass, but it's like 70,000 times 5, which is probably around 350,000 Umbral Shards. It's not insane, sure, and you can just buy 2 perkers. It's not like insane to get. It's just a bit stupid. I know you wouldn't necessarily get all your Umbral Shards from Gypsum casts, but just to put that in perspective, that's 875 Umbral casts that you would need to get. Not an insane amount, but you know, why do you want to do that? Obviously you'd be better just doing the actual expeditions that you're grinding the gear for, because you get like 6,000, which is only about 60 M10 runs at gold. So it's not like stupidly crazy, but I do think it's stupidly stupid, and I think it's bordering ridiculous. Just saying the phrase human trophy to me is a bit insane. Yes, I'm going to get my human trophy. What do you need? I need my human digit. I mean, I just cannot get behind it. And I don't think this is going to change until probably the expansion, if I'm honest. It sounds like the worm is going to be Angry Earth, so I don't think it's going to change until after the summer patch. That likely means it'll either come just before the expansion or at the expansion. But please, I am hoping that they change this system. As I said, I know that it works, and I apologize to anybody who's grinded it out. I'm not trying to diminish your achievements, but the system has now gone into the ridiculous, and I think it needs changing. I can't imagine trying to stop you, but let me know your thoughts, what you think about what I've just said in the comments below. Bit of a rambly video there, but if you want to support me and help me grow the channel, becoming a YouTube member is truly the best way. Otherwise, you can come and follow me over on Twitch. I'll be streaming basically Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon UK time, and I try and stream some evenings as well, whenever I get the time basically. So come and check me out there. What you should definitely do though is have a most beautiful day, like and subscribe. Goodbye.